You are standing at the place where Philadelphia's Negro League memory is becoming public space again. Look first at the intersection, then at the marker, memorial work, and mural rather than imagining that the old ballpark still survives beneath your feet. The field once known as Penmar Park stood near 44th and Parkside. The Stars moved here after their 1933 season at Passon Field, and this became their home through 1952. The park was not a polished major league venue. It had rough conditions, high grass, and the Pennsylvania Railroad roundhouse close to the left field fence, where soot could drift into play. But the Stars could draw thousands, and sometimes as many as 10,000 people, because the team was part of neighborhood life. Ed Bolden was an owner, organizer, and businessman, not merely a name behind the roster. His club gave local players a professional stage and helped connect Philadelphia to the National Negro League circuit. Think of the names that pass through this story: Judd Wilson, Biz Mackey, Roy Campanella, Satchel Paige, and the many Philadelphia players whose careers did not end at the edge of a box score. Earlier teams, including the Philadelphia Giants and the Pythians, made the diamond a claim to citizenship. Hilldale made the region a championship center. The Stars made Philadelphia itself the home address. In 2026, MLB and Phillies Charities announced a major redesign of this memorial park. That matters because preservation is not only about recovering a lost field. It is about deciding that black baseball deserves durable public architecture, maintenance, and attention. At 48th and Spruce, the most important thing to see is what is no longer here. Passon Field was a ballpark, but it was also a proposition: could a black professional team claim a stable place inside Philadelphia's sports economy? The field was taken over and equipped by Harry Passon, a white sporting goods businessman and promoter whose network touched both white and black teams. The Philadelphia Stars used the site from 1933 to 1935. Their owner, Ed Bolden, had already learned how fragile black baseball institutions could be. He had been associated with Hilldale, and when he founded the Stars he built a team that could operate independently before joining Gus Greenlee's revived Negro National League in 1934. The Stars won that year's championship, but their first city home was not simple or secure. Passon Field had lights, seating, and a grandstand, yet contemporary accounts describe violence and instability around the field. Those conditions helped push the team toward Penmar Park at 44th and Parkside. Notice what this does to the familiar story of integration. The question was not only whether black athletes could play. It was who owned the grounds, who controlled the schedule, who protected the spectators, who took the financial risk, and whose version of the neighborhood counted as legitimate. This stop is therefore a story about infrastructure before it is a story about nostalgia. The field is gone, and the site is associated today with West Philadelphia High School's athletic facilities. Use the absence as part of the narration. The Stars did not disappear because Philadelphia lacked a black baseball audience. They moved because a team needed a home that could sustain competition, safety, and community. A few stops from now, Sheba Park will show the other side of the same problem. Black teams could fill a major league stadium and still be guests in the city's official baseball story. Begin with the marker and the ordinary streets around it. There is no surviving Hilldale grandstand to make the story easy. The work here is to imagine the scale of what once stood in this region and then to notice how little physical evidence can remain when black sporting institutions were treated as temporary, private, or secondary. Hilldale's field was associated with Derby, later the Yeadon area, and the club's story reaches back to Ed Bolden's construction of a permanent home in 1914. This was not a minor local team. Hilldale won 3 consecutive Eastern Colored League pennants in 1923, 1924, and 1925. In 1924, the club faced the Kansas City Monarchs in the first Negro World Series. A year later, Hilldale won the championship. The roster and orbit included Hall of Fame figures such as Judy Johnson, Pop Lloyd, Oscar Charleston, Biz Mackey, Martin Dihigo, and Louis Santop. Let those names change the map in your mind. A team based outside Philadelphia could be a national power, and a championship series could bring the region's black baseball economy into direct conversation with Chicago, Kansas City, and other major centers. The marker also helps correct a common mistake: black baseball was not invented in 1920 when the Negro National League formed. Philadelphia's Pythians, the Philadelphia Giants, and clubs connected to the Cuban Giants had already built players, audiences, and institutions. Hilldale inherited that earlier world and made it durable. It also connects forward to the Stars. Ed Bolden's experience with Hilldale shaped his later work in Philadelphia, and the Stars carried the same basic question into a new decade: how can a black team build a home, protect its identity, and make its excellence impossible to ignore? As you leave, hold on to the regional geography. The Delaware Valley was not a backdrop to Philadelphia baseball. It was one of its engines. At Cobb's Creek, let the landscape do some of the talking. Golf can look quiet from the outside, but the history here is about who was allowed to enter, practice, compete, and imagine a professional future. The course opened in 1916 as an open-to-the-public facility. That did not make the wider golf world equal, and it did not erase the barriers of private clubs, tournament invitations, housing, travel, or sponsorship. It did create something essential: a place where black golfers could build serious skill. Charlie Sifford arrived in Philadelphia from North Carolina in 1939 and found a home course here. He would later become the first black golfer to play regularly on the PGA Tour, breaking through in 1961 after years of exclusion and hostility. But his professional breakthrough should not make the local story disappear. Cobb's Creek was the practice ground, the social network, and the visible proof that talent grows when facilities are available. In 1947, this course hosted the Negro National Open. Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion, was first-round leader. Howard Booth Wheeler, a major black golf pioneer, and Sifford were among the notable figures connected to that competition. Look across the fairway and imagine those players not as isolated heroes but as people moving through a black golf ecosystem that included the United Golf Association, local clubs, public courses, and community spectators. Sifford's later Presidential Medal of Freedom made the national significance clear, but the route wants you to remember the municipal ground beneath it. Public infrastructure can carry a civil rights history even when it was not built as a monument. Cobb's Creek is also an active place, with restoration and new investment underway in 2026. Treat it as living public space. Stay on visitor paths, respect golfers, and understand that the historical stop is not a museum frozen in 1947. It is a continuing argument about who gets access to green space, instruction, and the next level of the game. You are at a historical location, not a preserved 1930s YMCA interior. Start by noticing the present-day building and the density of Germantown Avenue. Then picture the institution that once connected sport to everyday life for black women and girls. The Germantown Women's YMCA was more than a place to practice. It offered basketball, tennis, swimming, social life, and a structure through which young women could become visible to one another and to the black press. In 1929, its colored branch formed the Germantown Hornets. The next season the Hornets went 22-1 and claimed the 1930-31 Colored Women's National Championship. Ora Washington was part of that story. She was already one of the most formidable black tennis players of her generation, eventually winning 7 consecutive American Tennis Association singles titles. Basketball made her athletic identity even more expansive. Washington and the Hornets also belonged to the same Philadelphia world as the Tribune Girls. Backed by the Philadelphia Tribune, the team built a national circuit and won 11 straight women's colored basketball world championships between 1932 and 1942. Imagine what that required: travel, money, newspapers, reliable courts, opponents, coaches, and a public willing to treat women's competition as news. The black press did not merely report these teams. It helped create the market and the memory that made their careers possible. This is also a place to resist a narrow definition of athletic greatness. Washington did not need the modern professional league structure to become a champion. She moved through voluntary associations and segregated institutions that had to create their own opportunities. The present site cannot reproduce that world, and it should not pretend to. Instead, use the address as a doorway into the network, a YMCA, a newspaper, a basketball team, a tennis champion, and the girls who learned that the court could belong to them. As the route continues, keep Washington in the center, not in a footnote between male teams. Stand where the track turns and imagine the earliest Penn Relay Carnival before the stadium looked like this. The first meet took place in 1895, when the facilities were still rough and the track was not yet fully finished. Franklin Field would be completed as a permanent stadium in 1903, but the relay tradition already had a public life. That matters because the Penn Relays became one of the places where school teams, colleges, HBCUs, international athletes, and spectators met on the same athletic calendar. In 1920, Lincoln University, Howard University, and Cheney joined the meet as early HBCU participants. Black participation was not a decorative addition. It changed the scale and meaning of the event, creating a recurring network of competition that linked Philadelphia to black colleges across the country. Now bring the focus closer. John Baxter Taylor was raised in Philadelphia, attended Central High School, and became a Penn track star. He set a quarter-mile record at Franklin Field's Intercollegiate Championships in 1904. In 1908, he won gold in London's medley relay, becoming the first African-American Olympic gold medalist. He died in Philadelphia later that same year. His story is often reduced to a record and a medal, but this ground helps restore the sequence: school, city, university, meet, national team, and a community that made an athlete legible to the world. Listen to the vocabulary of the place: exchange zone, baton, split, anchor. Relay running is collective by design. One athlete's speed is never enough, the handoff has to be trusted. That makes Franklin Field an especially useful stop for this route. Black sports history is full of individual brilliance, but it is also full of institutions and people who passed opportunity forward. The Penn Relays show that public recognition can be built through repetition. Every year the meet returned, and every year another generation could see a path from a Philadelphia lane to a national stage. At 4842 Ridge Avenue, begin with the fact that the center is active. You are not standing at a memorial to a finished career, you are standing at an organization that continues to use tennis as a vehicle for education and leadership. Philadelphia's connection to Arthur Ashe developed through youth programming and the National Junior Tennis League tradition. The Philadelphia Tennis Patrons Association and local organizers thwarted access in the 1950s and 1970s. The Arthur Ashe Youth Tennis Center opened in Manayunk in 1983. Philadelphia Youth Tennis took Ashe's name in 2003, the East Falls Center opened in 2006, and in 2012 the organization became Legacy Youth Tennis and Education. Those dates show how a legacy is made, not by a single naming ceremony, but by facilities, coaches, donors, families, and young people returning year after year. Ashe himself belongs in the route's wider Philadelphia tennis story. He played the Philadelphia WCT event in 1974, and the Germantown Cricket Club is documented as a venue connected to him and other champions. But the route is careful here. This is not Ashe's childhood home, and it is not a promise of interior access. It is a Philadelphia institution built in his name and shaped by his public philosophy. Look at the courts as educational rooms. The lesson is not only how to serve or return. It is how to manage frustration, read an opponent, keep an appointment, speak to a coach, and imagine a future larger than the neighborhood's immediate constraints. Legacy describes its work through confidence, determination, professionalism, resilience, respect, teamwork, and toughness. Those words can sound like generic sports language until you place them beside the history of exclusion in American tennis. Ashe's achievement mattered because he entered a system that had often treated black players as exceptions. His Philadelphia legacy matters because exception is not enough. The real question is how to make access ordinary for the next generation. Listen for the difference between honoring a champion and building a pipeline. This center attempts the second, slow down before you reach the stable. Fletcher Street is not a movie set and the horses are not props for a visitor photograph. This is an active community site, so remain on public space, do not enter the stable without permission, and let the riders decide whether conversation or photography is welcome. The respect is part of the history. Philadelphia's black urban riding communities grew from work, horse-drawn delivery, transport, racing, training, and the city's long relationship to Fairmount Park and neighborhood stables. When automobiles changed the economy, black riders did not simply abandon the animals. They kept horses in the city and carried the skills, friendships, and ethics of horsemanship forward. Ellis Ferrell began riding in Philadelphia in the 1940s. He opened his first neighborhood stable in 1980 and founded Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club as a non-profit in 2004. The Library of Congress describes the club's significance through the cultural history of the black cowboy and its role in shaping inner-city youth. Those words are useful only if we hear the practical meaning underneath them. A horse demands feeding, cleaning, patience, physical courage, and attention to another living body. Young riders learn that reputation is not a costume. It is earned by returning, doing the work, and being trusted with responsibility. The club has also survived pressure, unstable land, changing city policy, animal welfare conflict, and the loss of other black-owned stables. In 2019, new stables and land arrangements gave the community another layer of security, but security is never permanent. The film Concrete Cowboy brought national attention, yet the club's history is older and more complicated than the film. Do not flatten it into a story about rescue or romanticize poverty as authenticity. Hear it as a story of black people preserving a skilled urban culture on their own terms. Horses, riders, youth, and neighbors make the institution. The route includes Fletcher Street because sports history is not limited to stadiums. It can live in a stable yard, in the quiet before a ride, and in the discipline of caring for something that depends on you. At the Nile, look at the club as a community-built answer to a public problem. In the late 1950s, Yeadon had a growing black middle class of homeowners, professionals, teachers, ministers, and business owners. Yet the town's white swim club excluded black families. Applications disappeared, or membership was denied outright. The response was not simply a lawsuit or a request for a better welcome. Black residents organized, raised money, and built their own pool. 326 original bondholders reportedly contributed to the project, and when the Nile opened in July 1959, more than 1,000 people came through on the first day. The club opened to everyone, regardless of race. That history changes the emotional register of the stop. This is not only a story about segregation and injury. It is about a community deciding that leisure, safety, and joy were worth owning. Swimming is often described as recreation, but access to water has always been connected to health, childhood freedom, survival, and social class. A pool can tell you who is welcome to spend a summer afternoon without explanation. The Nile became a regional institution, drawing members from Philadelphia, New Jersey, and the surrounding suburbs. It hosted parties, music, and public figures, but its most important legacy was ordinary continuity. Children learned to swim, families gathered, and a black-owned space kept operating across generations. The club's 2021 Pennsylvania historical marker places that achievement in the public record. Notice the difference between a marker and the institution itself. The marker preserves memory, the pool produced lived experience. As you stand here, connect the Nile to Cobb's Creek, the PDR program, and the recreation centers later in the route. Each site answers the same question in a different way. What does access look like when a community builds the conditions itself? Please respect current members and any seasonal access rules. This is a working club, not an open-air museum. You are at the Kroc Center, but the origin story reaches back through Philadelphia's public pool system. Jim Ellis founded PDR Swimming for Success in 1971. The name carried the Philadelphia Department of Recreation, while the program's public meaning became pride, determination, and resilience. Ellis was not simply coaching strokes. He was challenging a persistent American myth that black urban children were uninterested in swimming or somehow lacked the body, discipline, or culture for competitive water sports. The problem was never a lack of talent. It was access, safe pools, consistent hours, trained instruction, transportation, family support, and a path beyond the neighborhood facility. PDR built that path inside the public system. The team trained through facilities including Marcus Foster Pool in Nicetown, faced closures and changing conditions, and continued through family fundraising and community support. Swimmers earned college opportunities and qualified for Olympic trials across multiple cycles. The 2007 film Pride made the story legible to a national audience, but film can compress years of maintenance into a few dramatic scenes. The real achievement was repeatability. A team had to show up after the movie audience went home, and swimmers had to keep returning to the lane. This current Kroc Center stop should therefore be narrated honestly. It is the present base for PDR's program, not the exact pool where every early practice happened. The route uses it as a bridge between the older recreation infrastructure and the living organization. Look for the ordinary details: lane lines, wet floors, schedules, parents waiting, a coach correcting a turn. Those are the physical parts of the history. PDR belongs beside the Nile Swim Club because both stories answer exclusion with community-built access. The Nile created a place to swim and gather. PDR created a competitive pipeline inside public recreation. Together they show that Black swimming history is not a single story of overcoming fear. It is a story of institutions deciding that water, coaching, and excellence belong to everyone. At Marian Anderson Recreation Center, notice how much history can fit inside a building that might look ordinary from the street. The city lists a playground, ball field, pool, basketball courts, gymnasium, boxing gym, dojo, computer room, and multi-purpose rooms. That combination is a map of public life. A recreation center is not only where an athlete practices a sport. It is where a child waits after school, where a coach learns names, where a family finds a program, and where a neighborhood creates structure without needing a private club. The center is named for Marian Anderson, the Philadelphia contralto whose career challenged racial barriers in music. That name places cultural excellence and athletic development in the same civic frame. The route also connects this site to Dawn Staley's Philadelphia path. Staley grew up in a city where public courts, school gyms, and neighborhood leagues could be more important than formal facilities. The exact court history is spread across Philadelphia, so do not reduce her story to a claim that this building alone made her career. Use the rec center as an example of the ecosystem: repetition, local competition, family support, and the chance to be seen. The same ecosystem produced basketball players, boxers, swimmers, and young people whose names never entered a national record. That is why the route did not place recreation centers below arenas. An arena records the finished performance. A rec center holds the unfinished years. Look at the court lines and the building's multiple rooms. Each one suggests a different kind of training: footwork, conditioning, discipline, social confidence, and the ability to return tomorrow after a disappointing game today. Marian Anderson Rec Center is also a living rebuild project, so construction, programming, and access can change. Do not promise interior entry or assume every feature is open at all hours. Let the stop remain grounded in the public idea: sports become possible when a city maintains places where young people can show up. At the Palestra, listen for the building before you think about a particular score. The low ceiling, close seats, worn wood, and compressed sightlines create an atmosphere in which spectators become part of the game. Penn opened the building in 1927, and it became known as the Cathedral of College Basketball. The nickname is not only about age. It is about the way Philadelphia treats basketball as a public language, with the Big Five, neighborhood loyalties, school rivalries, and debates that continue long after the final horn. Black basketball history moves through this building in several directions. Overbrook High School sent Wilt Chamberlain and other future stars to the Palestra floor. Public school players entered a college environment that could elevate them, scrutinize them, and sometimes reproduce the racial and class boundaries of higher education. The arena is therefore both a stage and a system. Do not describe it as if it belonged outside the history of Black Philadelphia. At the same time, do not turn it into a Black institution it was not. The more precise story is about circulation. Players developed in public schools, recreation centers, neighborhood courts, and leagues such as Sunny Hills. They then entered institutional spaces like Penn, the Big Five, and the Palestra, carrying styles and expectations with them. Fans carried the stories back out into the city. That movement made the arena matter. Look at the doorway and imagine the generations who entered not only to watch a game but to measure a future. College basketball could offer scholarship, recognition, professional visibility, and a route across a segregated city. It could also expose who had access to coaching, admissions, money, and media attention. Hold both truths together. This is a historic venue, not a simple monument to meritocracy. The Palestra helps the route move from community infrastructure to formal competition while keeping the two connected. A polished arena does not replace the neighborhood court. It depends on the pipeline that the neighborhood court begins. Stand across from the building and treat it as a historical site, not an operating gym. Joe Frazier's Cloverleigh Gym opened here in 1968 after an investment group that sponsored him purchased the building. The structure had earlier industrial and ballroom uses, which makes the conversion meaningful. Philadelphia boxing did not require a pristine sports palace. It could turn a hard, adaptable building on North Broad into a laboratory for a world champion. Frazier's training story is often swallowed by the spectacle of his fights with Muhammad Ali. Bring it back to the routine. Roadwork before sunrise. Heavy bags. Sparring partners. The repetition of a jab until it could survive fatigue. Corner people who knew when to push and when to protect. The gym prepared Frazier for the 1971 fight of the century, for the rematch with Ali in Madison Square Garden, and for the championship fights that made his pressure style one of the most recognizable in boxing. He had already won Olympic gold at the 1964 Tokyo Games, but the gym represents the next phase, a professional environment owned by a fighter and shaped around his method. The site also belongs to a broader Philadelphia boxing network. Black fighters, trainers, promoters, and neighborhood gyms made boxing a route through which working-class young men could build skill, income, identity, and sometimes international fame. That route was never safe or equal. Fighters endured exploitative contracts, dangerous conditions, racism, and the expectation that pain was proof of character. Do not romanticize the punishment. Pay attention instead to the organization required to make a fighter. Cloverleigh was a workplace, a classroom, and a community landmark. It was also connected to the city around it, Broad Street traffic, nearby row houses, corner food, and the people who knew when Frazier was in camp. The gym closed in 2008, and the building's later uses remind us that historic sports places can be commercially reused without their meaning disappearing. The route keeps the address because the physical building can still prompt the right question: what labor has to be hidden behind a champion's public image? At the Dell, let the route change its volume. You are no longer standing at a ball field, pool, or gym. You are standing in a public performance space where Philadelphia gathered to hear music, see stars, and share an evening outside the walls of a formal theater. The venue began in 1929 as Robin Hood Dell East, a summer home for the Philadelphia Orchestra. In the decades that followed, this Fairmount Park setting became part of Black Philadelphia's entertainment geography, including the essence of entertainment concert tradition that the city has presented since 1972. The sports connection is not that every event here was a boxing match. It is that athletic culture and performance culture shared an infrastructure of crowds, promoters, celebrity, rehearsal, and spectacle. The route's archival layer points to the Joe Louis boxing ring and the mid-century fight culture remembered in the wider Fairmount Park Entertainment District. Treat that connection as historical context, not as a claim that the present stage is a preserved boxing site. Joe Louis was a heavyweight champion whose name traveled through arenas, radio, newspapers, music venues, and neighborhood conversation. A fighter's public life was never only the 9 minutes between bells. It was the crowd waiting outside, the announcer building suspense, the band or performer sharing the bill, and the city deciding what kind of greatness deserved a public stage. Look across the amphitheater and imagine how Black audiences made outdoor space feel like home. The Dell's current program includes concerts and educational opportunities, and the venue remains active under parks and recreation. That continuity is important. Black history is often presented as a series of vanished clubs, demolished gyms, and lost ballparks. Here, the more useful story is the persistence of public gathering. Music carried sports memory, and sports carried the language of performance, entrance, rhythm, timing, endurance, crowd response. This stop gives the root room to breathe before it returns to basketball. It asks you to hear an athlete's city, not just watch an athlete's statistics. You are at Rufus O. Williams Memorial Playground, the current court site that anchors this Roots Allen Iverson story. The city lists the playground at 700 Cobbs Creek Parkway, near 63rd and Catherine Streets. In June 2025, the 76ers and Penn Medicine unveiled refurbished courts here with Iverson present. The redevelopment included 2 full-size courts and 2 half-courts, turning a neighborhood facility into a renewed public stage. Begin with the courts themselves. Their lines, rims, fences, and surrounding homes tell you something that an arena cannot. Basketball fame is often built in places where no scout is promised, no television camera is waiting, and the next game begins as soon as the previous one ends. Allen Iverson became one of Philadelphia's clearest examples of that movement from public court imagination to global celebrity. His 2001 MVP season, 4 scoring titles, 11 All-Star selections, and trip to the NBA Finals are the official record. The deeper city story is style. Iverson made the crossover feel like autobiography: change direction, keep your balance, refuse the defender's script, and make the body answer pressure with invention. Do not place all of that mythology on one court or pretend this was the only site where he played. Use Rufus Williams Court as a living continuation of the public court culture that made his story legible. The 2025 reopening matters because the city did not only put Iverson's name on a statue. It invested in the kind of shared facility where the next generation can practice. This is also why the former Hampton Park label and the Old South Broad coordinates have been removed from the public pack. The current location is verifiable, the public court principle is the lasting subject. Look for the difference between a monument and a resource. A monument tells you who mattered. A functioning court gives someone else a chance to matter next. In that sense, the best Iverson memorial is not a pose frozen in bronze. It is a court with players on it. At Overbrook, begin with the school as a living institution before you reach for the legend. Public schools in Philadelphia have long carried more than classroom instruction. They carry neighborhood identity, rivalries, banners, coaches, alumni stories, and the hope that a young person's talent might change how the city sees a block. Wilt Chamberlain's direct connection to Overbrook made this school one of the most famous basketball addresses in Philadelphia. He led the basketball team, drew crowds, and turned high school games into public events long before the professional spotlight. His size made him impossible to overlook, but size alone does not explain the legacy. A school system, coaches, teammates, opponents, reporters, and fans created the conditions in which he could become a city story. The route also names Kobe Bryant here only as part of the wider Philadelphia high school basketball orbit. Bryant attended Lower Merion, not Overbrook. The distinction matters because local sports history becomes less accurate when every famous player is placed at the nearest iconic school. What connects Chamberlain and Bryant is the regional pipeline, school gyms, suburban and city rivalries, newspapers, college attention, and the way Philadelphia measured a young player's future. Look at Overbrook as a place where athletic identity was made collectively. A high school athlete might be carrying family expectations, neighborhood pride, and the pressure of becoming a symbol before adulthood. Black athletes faced additional scrutiny, from stereotypes about intelligence and discipline to unequal resources and the assumption that sport was their only valuable path. The best narration does not treat the school as a factory for professional players. It asks what else the gym offered: belonging, structure, mentorship, and a reason to keep practicing. This stop follows the rec center and palestra because those places are connected. Public recreation gives a child a first court. School competition gives the talent a record and a team. College arenas give the story a larger stage. Overbrook is the middle link, where possibility becomes visible enough for a city to argue about it. At Tustin Playground, focus on the word league. A league is more than a court and more than a pickup game. It requires a schedule, officials or trusted adults, teams, opponents, transportation, publicity, and a reason for families and coaches to return. Sunny Hill's Community Involvement League began in 1968 and helped turn the summer court into exactly that kind of civic structure. Hill was known as a broadcaster and basketball personality, but his deeper Philadelphia role was organizing attention. He helped create a setting where neighborhood talent could be evaluated in public, where a young player could be measured against someone from another section of the city, and where coaches, scouts, and families could all participate in the same conversation. That visibility matters in a city where basketball reputation can travel quickly but opportunity does not always travel with it. Tustin is therefore not just a place where famous players may have passed through. It is a place where a city practiced recognizing talent. Resist the temptation to turn the league into a simple ladder from street court to NBA. Most players do not become professional stars, and the value of a summer league cannot be reduced to the few names that make the newspapers. The league gave young people competition, structure, peer identity, coaching, and an audience. Those are meaningful outcomes even when the next stop is a job, college, family responsibility, or another neighborhood court. This stop also completes a thread running through the route. The palestra represents institutional basketball. Overbrook represents the public school. Rufus Williams Court represents the renewed neighborhood facility. Tustin represents the organized summer network that connects them. The Sunny Hill League belongs to Philadelphia's black sports history because it built a civic bridge between informal play and formal opportunity. Look at the rims and the open space around them. The important question is not who will become famous here. It is who gets the chance to be seen, coached, and remembered at all. At this historical site, imagine the ballpark by its schedule before you imagine it by its walls. Sheba Park opened in 1909 for the Philadelphia Athletics. The Phillies later rented it for home games, and the venue became one of the city's official baseball centers. Yet Black Philadelphia had already built its own baseball world outside the major league structure. Beginning in 1943, the Philadelphia Stars were able to play selected home games here, generally on Monday nights when the schedules of the Athletics and Phillies left an opening. That limited access still produced extraordinary crowds. In 1945, 9 weeknight Stars games drew nearly 102,000 people. The number matters because it breaks the old assumption that Negro League teams were small or peripheral. The Stars could bring Philadelphia into a major league stadium. They could attract black and white spectators. They could create the energy that owners and newspapers recognized as profitable. What they could not do was enter the official league structure on equal terms. The Phillies did not field their first black player until 1957, when John Irving Kennedy appeared in 5 games. That was a decade after Jackie Robinson integrated the Dodgers and after the Stars had already demonstrated the quality and market for black baseball. Hold those dates together. A stadium could open its gates for a fee while the organization that owned the city franchise kept its roster segregated. Commercial recognition was not the same as citizenship, employment, or institutional power. The site also carries the Stars' 1940s relationship to the larger region. Players moved among Penmar Park, Sheba, Camden, Atlantic City, and other venues because Negro League baseball required constant travel and flexible scheduling. The field was not a stable home in the same sense as a community-owned club. It was a rented stage, but a rented stage could still become a site of collective memory. Sheba Park was renamed Connie Mack Stadium and remained a major Philadelphia venue until 1970. The structure was later demolished. What remains here is a place to end the route with an uncomfortable question: when did Philadelphia decide that black excellence belonged in its official record, and how much had already been proven before recognition arrived? The answer is still being revised.